Wow, it's great to be here. Fantastic opening panel. My name's Stefan Nicola. I'm an editor with Bloomberg's global business team in Berlin. I focus on the automotive and industrials coverage. And probably more like many of you here, I am an active member of the mobility space. I take my bike to work when it's nice. I hop into the subway to actually go to a train station last weekend, and I took a train to come here to Munich from Berlin. And in a few weeks' time, I'll board a plane to take a short holiday to get away from it all. In other words, I'm a potential customer to every panelist here. And how these companies will compete, but also collaborate, will shape the way we will experience mobility in the future. And that kicks us off. And I want to start with German bicycle manufacturer Riese and Muller. Dr. Wolf, I understand your company was actually founded with connected mobility in mind. Your first product was a folding bicycle, isn't that right? Can you talk to us a bit about the motivation behind that and where you see yourself in connected mobility today?
Yeah, first of all, I think I have some more time to explain a little bit who Riese and Muller is, because most of the brands here people know in the room and in the world. And so it's very extraordinary that a bike manufacturer sits here at the IAA Mobility, which is a great pleasure, to be honest. And as you said, our founding product was a folding bike, so-called Birdie, which was in 1993, when Heiko Müller and Markus Riese founded as young engineers a typical startup in their parents' garage. And their motivation, as you asked me, was cycling. They were passionate about cycling. They just want to cycle. I mean, they were mechanical engineers, and they had a product that has to be mechanically engineered. And so they were wondering, at that time already, how can they improve last mile, which means how can they connect the car with the place they want to go, or the train with the place they want to go. And so they decided to do a folding bike, to take it with them all the times, because they never wanted to miss a bike in their life. And this was really the founding story, to have this bike. And the idea at that time, mountain biking was very hip. And so people were used to have premium bikes with full suspension. And so they put this full suspension idea to build a premium folding bicycle, so that it's really comfortable and it's also fun to ride this little bike. And so that was 1993, 30 years ago, and then I have to admit we had 20 years which were rather difficult for Riese and Muller, because even we had this idea of changing mobility, no one was really interested in changing mobility with a normal bike. We had a lot of bike enthusiasts in the world. They always took their bike, but no one really wanted to change mobility with like discomfort and sweating. And then in 2012, which is almost 11 years ago, we decided to go from normal bikes to e-bikes. And as a company with, at that time, 35 employees, we decided to make a full shift and to change from normal, non-motorized bikes to e-bikes, and only do e-bikes. And we did the shift in 1 year. So it was a very hard cut for us as young entrepreneurs. And ever since, we had like a huge race, because the motor was itself an accelerator for mobility shift. And we grew 40 to 50% each year for the last 10 years, and we are now 1,000 people in Darmstadt, and we produce fully in Germany. We produce 110,000 bikes a year, and we are really very like on a rise, like with a bike, because we saw everything that was in this founding idea is now in. And the mobility shift, I think why I'm sitting here today, is really because now you see that bike really plays a vital and important role in this shift, and we are an industry that is transformative, that is innovative, and it is sustainable.
Great. And shifting to electric in 1 year, that's quite a feat, as some of the companies here at this Messe know. Dr. Peterson, one of Ries and Müller's bikes, early bikes, the folding bikes, surely ended up in several of your trains, I'm sure of that. You also have a long history of transporting people through Germany, through Europe, with its ups and downs along the way. How do you want to make this large company, state-owned company, fit for the connected future and to sort of keep, transporting folding bikes across the country?
Yes. First of all, I would like to say hello to the panel and to the audience, and also send the regards of Dr. Richard Lutz, who's the CEO of Deutsche Bahn, who was supposed to sit here on the panel, but as he fell ill, he asked me to replace him, but I should send his best regards here. So first of all, I think if we talk about transportation and mobility and how to make it fit for the future, I think it's all about capacity and attractivity of the model. And if we look at our railroad system, I think we have to build the infrastructure and make it fit for the ever-growing demand for transportation. And why demand is increasing in railroad, I think is pretty obvious. Because if you look at the recent development over the last couple of decades, I think no motorized mode of transportation has the same feature as a railroad. And that is, you can be mobile, but at the same time, it's better for the climate. On the other hand, the motorized mode of transportation of railroad is the most energy efficient mode of transportation, and therefore it's the mode where you save most CO2 by staying mobile. And on the attractivity side, I think it's important that you increase frequency and that you can provide speed to customers, because those are the two factors most people choose their mode of transportation, whether it fits their need or not. And you can see that, for example, if you look at the connection from Stuttgart to Paris, 9 out of 10 passengers choose the rail when they travel on that road. And from that perspective, I think we need to think mobile, first of all, from the customer need perspective, but we also need to think of it as a holistic and integrated model. So we need to look at different modes of transportation, how we can best combine them. And we started that, I think, a couple of years ago. I mean, one of the combinations would be the folding bike, putting it into the train. But a couple of years ago, we started also the cooperation with the airlines. So, and building on the success model of Lufthansa Express Rail, we also joined then last year the Star Alliance as the first non-airline joining a flight alliance here, because we wanted to enable people to travel, for example, from Freiburg to Singapore with just one single ticket. And if you look at the increasing demand of people who want to start their journey where they live and go to whatever place in the world, we also see that Lufthansa Express Rail, for example, is a success model where we grew from 2019 to 2022 by 25%. And I think this is only possible if you think it in an integrated model. And this is also true for our stations. So basically, we think of our train stations as mobility hubs. And you can experience that already today when you look, for example, at Berlin-Südkreuz or Stuttgart-Vaihingen, where we have built the infrastructure to have people come to the station by whatever mode of transport they enjoy, or arrive at the station and go to their destination, be it by e-scooter, by shared mobility, by bikes, etc. We have also upgraded the station, especially for bicycle riders, so that they can do repair, maintenance at the station, that they find spacious parking lots. And I think this is important, that you think of it in this special way. And this is also the topic of this week's event in Berlin. There's the Zukunft Nahverkehr. It's an event by the local and regional transportation industry, hosted by DB. And people there also think exactly about the connection of different modes of transportation and how to make it more convenient for people and fit their needs. And I think this closes the circle also here to IAA, because we are all here because we want to provide the mobility of the future for people. And we have to think here holistically across the modes of transportation for the environment, for the people, but also for the economy.
Yeah, you've mentioned the cooperation with Lufthansa. Interestingly enough, though, you're also competing with Lufthansa, at least for inner German travel. And that brings me to Carsten Spohr. Mr. Spohr, do we still need those inner German flights, or should we all take the train?
Well, that's an easy answer, because our customers clearly say yes. The customer is always right? I mean, I just ordered an SUV a few months ago. The car manufacturer I'd chosen did not tell me, oh, Mr. Spohr, don't get an SUV. We also have smaller cars for you, much more convenient. So I think the customer has a choice of mobility, but it's our job as an airline, as Deutsche Bahn, to offer options. And we do. Every single destination we serve in Germany from Frankfurt, we also offer by rail. Truth is, less than 10% choose the train. More than 90% of our German domestic passengers who connect in Frankfurt choose the airplane. In Munich, we cannot even offer the train because there's no train station at the airport. So intermodality, discussed for many decades, including here on stage today, is not even possible in this modern city of Munich. So that, of course, is something we cannot solve alone. Even you cannot solve alone. This politics need to do that. But to put numbers maybe to this, to put it into perspective, 2/3 of our domestic passengers are only connecting to a long-range flight. Point to point, within Germany, it's now less than 2% of our business. That's the little bit we may be competing. But even there, when the train more or less takes less than 2 hours, we give up the flight, unless there is connecting traffic. So we don't fly from Nuremberg to Berlin anymore. We don't fly from Hamburg to Berlin anymore, because there really the train is the better mode. But once it's more than 2.5 hours, or once you have connecting passengers, they do choose to be in the aviation system, at least most of them, at the very beginning. And let's be honest, anybody who connects in Frankfurt, coming from Germany, could also connect in Amsterdam, connect in Paris or London. We, for example, decided a couple of years ago to shut down our shortest route, which was Nuremberg-Munich. That indeed sounds crazy, right? But we lost all the business traveler from Nuremberg in Munich, because nobody wants to take the train from Nuremberg to Munich to then fly to Los Angeles. We recovered them partly in Frankfurt and Zurich, where we still fly to Nuremberg. But many of the managers, including your industry being quite strong in that area, we lost many of those passengers to Amsterdam and Paris because they don't want to be the train initially and then on an airplane. They want to be in the system, including the luggage service from the very beginning. So I think intermodality is key for the future, especially between our two modes of transport, but you need the infrastructure, like in Frankfurt or Zurich. And I think the passenger needs to continue to have a choice, because otherwise they choose competitors, in our case, or creating jobs outside of Germany, which then is not in our joint interest either. Yeah. So let's not forget, as in all of this discussion on sustainability, that rather than decide on ideology, I think it's for all of us, regardless which mode of transport we represent, important to always remind everybody to focus on technology and on the choice and the freedom of citizens and customers. And that, in the way, has optimized our society to where we are today. I think this will help us to optimize further.
Yeah, technology, that's a good buzzword for Ms. Muller of the VDA. Your industry is in the midst of a hugely challenging transition to electric vehicles. Is there even time to think about connected mobility? What role can the car play?
Yeah, that's the reason why we have, for example, this panel, why we are talking that the IAA Mobility is much more than a car show. What we heard and what we learned is the normal life of people. They use different opportunities and they choose what's the best for her life. And we are all pedestrians, we use bikes, we use the plane, the train, and we also use cars. Especially when you live in a landscape and there's no public transport, for example, then you urgently need a car to live your life. And that shows all numbers we have that the people want this. Our work is to make it as sustainable as possible, to go the path to electromobility, to think about circular economy and recycling, and to have the discussions about the interconnecting between all these things. And that's how can we make it for people easy to choose the things they need. And we are all competitors, but we are all customers from you. You buy cars for the train, and we are happy about every ton we can give to your cargo. And the same is a bit, you helped us when the supply chain was difficult during the pandemic situation, and so on. And as you can see here, a lot of our suppliers, for example, are in the electromobility, also in investing in bikes, because the electrical bikes and so on. And so we have this ecosystem that come more and more together. And for us, it's very necessary that we have discussion about this. And we offer this discussion also for the people who are against everything here, what the IAA representative, you know that we have some demonstrations and so on. We offered them and to come and to discuss with us how can we organize the mobility of the future together. And they said they won't come, they just want to demonstrate. Okay, it's their fault, but Mobility is not black and white. It's not about yes or no. We have to find opportunities to bring this together. We invest a lot of money in the next 5 years, around about 250 billion euros, in the new mobility and digitization, and more than 130 billion euros in building factories and so on. That shows us a huge investment in the future of mobility. You can see more than 300 world premieres here on the IAA Mobility. Yesterday we had the press conferences. I'm very deep impressed about all these things we saw here, and we got a show of innovation in the last days. And I'm sure that also the customers and the open spaces can also see the huge paths, the huge ways we go to the electromobility, for example. And that's a good message for the climate, for sustainability, and at the end also for the people in the world.
Yeah, sustainability is obviously another buzzword here at the show. Mr. Spohr, you can watch how the car industry is trying to transition to electric vehicles. We're still a bit away from large passenger planes going electric, but sustainability is important for your industry. I read a story recently saying that the world's passenger planes burn 100 billion gallons of jet kerosene each year. And to put that into a very Bavarian perspective, that's more than all the beer drunk globally in the world. So how do you plan to make flying more sustainable and make it sort of a lasting option for the future?
Yeah, I think for us, there's really 3 elements. Element number 1 and priority number 1, technology. Every new airplane we invest in Lufthansa, we get almost every 10 days a new airplane, reduces fuel and CO2 by 30%. Mainly the engines, to a certain degree the aircraft, but it's mainly the engines where technology has brought us a long way. The second level is SAF. We, in our industry, let's take Lufthansa. Every hour, to give you another number, we need 1,000 tons of fuel around the year, day and night. Out of that, 2 tons currently are SAF. 998 is fossil. And that's twice as much as the rest of the aviation industry. They are all at 1%. It's 0.1% of SAF, we are 0.2. So there's a long way to go, but that's one of the reasons I'm here, Mrs. Muller. I brought 2 messages, really. One you like, one you don't like. I'll start with the one you like. You are my most important industry as a customer. So thank you, and Herr Kirchhoff, Oliver Blume, Oliver Zipse, Ola. The German car industry, for us, is 10% of our cargo volumes and 1% of our passenger volumes. And I think that's an important message for this conference. Germany should not forget that. And Lufthansa maybe even has the option to switch to other markets around the world if the German car industry is not doing well. Many other industries and companies can't do that. So I think the importance of this industry you're representing, you're showcasing here, for a company like us and for many nameless companies in Germany is huge. So that's the one reason. The second message, with currently no technology in sight to replace fuels, we really need all the SAF in the world. I can give a little bit to Oliver for his 911, but the other volumes we really need, because there is no technology in sight, and the SAF hopefully being scaled up, which basically is e-fuels. We all currently only use bio-based SAF, which cannot be scaled up significantly, somewhat, but not much. The big scaling up will come from e-fuels, which are not available today. People always don't understand that. It's only in laboratories and universities, but not in larger scales. Once that is around, that will help aviation to become clean. On the third level, until we have enough SAF, is compensation. Compensation projects around the world, CO2 capture technology, which Germany unfortunately is not allowed, but in my view, which we'll need. And that overall will help to make aviation more sustainable. But it's also true, since we're among ourselves here, that 80% of my customers ask us to offer more sustainable ways of flying. 35% say they would be willing to pay for it, and 3% do pay for it on voluntary schemes, and most of them choose the less expensive option, which is compensation. Even less than a tenth of the 3% actually buy SAF, which we are offering. So already today, everybody can fly CO2 free if he or she decides to make that one little tick on the box in the booking buying SAF, but the scalability is limited. We estimate that if all SAF in the world would be available to Lufthansa, we would come up to 10, 12 days of operation of our 750 aircraft. Then all the SAF in the world is gone, and Lufthansa is only 3% of global aviation. So that shows you this huge leap we have to make in ramping up e-fuels, for which we need clean electricity, which we surely are not going to have in Germany. And for the electricity we have in Germany, it's much more efficient to give it directly into electromobility than to go the detour via creating e-fuels. That's why I think we in our industry, in all modesty, probably are the ones who will need this most for decades to come. There's no propulsion system inside to really replace fuels, not fossil, yes, SAF, but no fuels, because we have to carry our energy towards the destination.
When do you see e-fuels reaching sort of a critical mass for the aviation industry?
It's not even available for years to come.
Yeah.
And even what the EU has created in terms of blending mandate, all experts of the energy industry and e-fuel industry tell me are not achievable, because that fuel will just not be there. And it's costing between 5 and 10 times as much as current fuels. So how many passengers are willing to pay that? We'll see. And if you do that on a global scale, I wouldn't even mind. Then obviously demand for aviation would be reduced. Flying would become something for only a certain part of society, which I don't like, but that's one thing. But to have it only in Europe, blending mandates for this expensive fuel, and if people go via Dubai or via London or via Istanbul, you just avoid buying SAF. That obviously is not in the interest of not just our industry, but also in the interest of connecting Germany or other European countries to the world. So I think it's time that we wake up to reality. Enough engineers, I'm sure at this conference, we need to tell physical facts to those who take decisions to make sure that we move forward to become more sustainable, but at the same time don't lose our competitiveness in global markets.
Yeah, and obviously for go ahead. Yeah. And obviously for a mode of transportation to remain competitive, prices have to be at a certain level, and the investments needed to make flying more sustainable sound to me like they're a lot. Will flying become inevitably more expensive?
I think the clear answer is yes. It already
Who's going to pay for it?
Well, there's always only two who pay for everything. It's either consumers or taxpayers. Right?
Yeah, part of
and now the political discussion starts. How do you balance those two? But for me, that's even the second discussion. For me, more important is a global level playing field. It doesn't help the environment if a customer from Sweden goes via Istanbul to Singapore, because he doesn't need to be part of the blending mandate. If he goes via Paris, my biggest competitor, or via Munich, he or she needs to be part of that blending. Even the environment obviously has not achieved anything. You even go a detour, creating more CO2 and putting the German or European industry into a disadvantage. And this, and Mrs. Muller knows this, I'm not only saying this on stage, I have a huge respect for the German car industry, not only because you are my biggest customer and I'm trying to be nice here on stage, because you are a showcase of what Germany can do. In all modesty, Lufthansa tries to be part of that.
Thank you.
And what has happened to you in Brussels, surely I don't want to be repeated with Lufthansa.
Well, that's a good transition to Ms. Muller here. Yeah. We've talked about the transition and how challenging it is. You're facing high energy prices in Germany and in Europe, rising interest rates, inflation, all that sort of weighing on your companies. How competitive is Germany, is Europe as a whole for your industry?
Mm-hmm. Let me just point out one thing to the e-fuels discussion. Yesterday was the first international e-fuels conference. The Minister of Traffic and Digitization, Volker Wissing, launched here in Munich also, and there were a lot of ministers from other countries here. We have to ramp up this. Just saying we have 1.5 billion current cars and vans, the existing fleet. And when we want to reach the climate goals that the traffic sector is net zero, then we have to find solutions also for the existing cars and fleets. So that's only one reason for ramping up the e-fuels. Otherwise, we will have a huge problem there. So, but it's not an e-fuels discussion today. We want to talk about the connection of these things. But you pointed out a very, very important point. Yes. We are really competitive as companies, the German automotive industry, and we have the showcases here, is competitive all over the world with all the things, all components from the suppliers up to the OEMs, and also in the needs of digitization. We have different customer needs for cars, safety, comfort, and digitization, and any other things. And at the end, the customer decides. The German car industry will have 170 cars fully electric at the end of 2024, and there's something for everybody who needs a car. For us, it's necessary to point, so that is competitive. Germany and Europe is less competitive. We have a high competitive situation in the world. On one hand, we have the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act, or, for example, we have China with some clear industrial politics supporting the companies there. And here we have high energy costs, and we all need cheaper energy. Whatever we are doing, we all need more renewable energy and cheaper energy, so we have to invest much more in this. We need partnerships with other countries. We need the raw materials, everybody from us. We need raw materials from all over the world, and so we need treaties. It's not good to discuss more than 20 years about Mercosur, for example. And when we look at the latest development, for example, with the BRIC states and so on, Europe must be important, and Germany must be important to be competitive for the welfare of the people. They are creative. We have a lot of in our minds, and we want to bring it. And the German automotive industry will invest this money, but do they really can invest it in Germany? That's the question, and that's the main message to the government we have.
So you're concerned that German car makers, German components makers are going to go to places where it's more competitive for them to produce?
Yeah, sure, at the moment. And the numbers, not only from the German car industry, are really difficult. A lot of investments go out of Germany, a lot in Europe, where the energy prices are cheaper, a lot to the United States, for example, with the IRA I mentioned. We want to invest here. We want to be here, but then we need better conditions.
Yeah, and you've mentioned China. There's obviously a large Chinese presence here at IAA. The number of Chinese companies exhibiting has more than doubled compared to 2 years ago, so that's quite impressive. They're coming here with competitive products, with attractive products. How do you see the competition and maybe the partnership developing between those two powerful industries?
Yeah, we like competition. Competition makes everybody from us better. So we are happy to have them here. We are also happy to have the World New Energy Vehicle Congress here. It's the first time out of China. And so it's really necessary to have the discussion. We learn from each other. Suppliers invest here and in China also. So it's good, and at the end, it's good news for the customer.
Yeah.
And they came by plane, so it's very nice.
Right, yeah.
And by train.
Absolutely.
And some by bike.
Well, Dr. Wolfe, you listen to sort of the demands to politicians from those other industries. You don't have a sustainability issue. You know, the bike was always been one of the more, if not most sustainable forms of transportation apart from walking. But what do you need in terms of infrastructure? Is Germany on par with other places when it comes to bike infrastructure and the stuff you need to be part of that transition?
So first of all, maybe to respond to this, if you look at the bike industry, we are now developing as a very competitive industry in the world. German bike manufacturers and also the suppliers are very competitive. We build the best bikes, we build the best components in the world. And I think that's very important also for Germany to be seen as a mobility hub. And if we see it not only as a car or as a plane or whatever, I think if we look at Germany as a mobility center, I think we are very innovative, and we have a great future. However, if I look at tomorrow, we have household debates in Germany, and I look at what is planned for cycling. That is, we are not talking about billions, we are talking about millions. And there is a cut between 700 millions in 2022 to, they're talking about 300 millions, which will be discussed tomorrow, which is basically nothing. I think it's numbers you are really laughing about. For us, it's still a lot, but it's really not a lot. And it's not a lot to build up an infrastructure that we really need to put this micro-mobility in the forefront. And that means we need, of course, safe bike lanes for our riders, but also for the drivers, so that everybody is safe on the streets we are having. And I think we have a limited space, so we have to use it in the best way. So we need infrastructure, which means safe, but also continuous bike lanes. And we need parking space, because more bikes, and then we need, of course, also more and safe parking space. A second topic that I think is very important that we need, you also mentioned it, a level playing field, which means all of the vehicles need to have the same field that we can be based on, which means people that decide for a climate-friendly vehicle should have a benefit. They should be supported, and they should have also feel that it's really good to use a sustainable mode of transportation. And the third thing, which is maybe most of my discussions and also the thing that is closest to my heart, to be honest, is that we need to discuss that there is a common sense in the mobility industry, what we are aiming for. I think it's, yes, it's my product, it's your product, it's the car, it's the technology. But in the end, and we also talked about this, it's about the consumer. But not always the consumer as the one who gives us the money, but also the consumer who lives on this planet. And I think it's really important that we see what do they need and how can we develop a mobility that is really in the needs of the customers, that we have a common sense, that we discuss very transparent, very critical, because if you see Paris, of course, they have a huge transformation, but there's also a lot of criticism, of course, because we are in the transformation, and we need to stick to a certain attitude. We need to have brave decisions, entrepreneur-wise, politician-wise and society-wise. I think otherwise, if we don't have a common sense, if we play in the same, on the same field, I think then it's not collaborative, it's not connecting, and I think that's very important that we also invest, be it time, be it money, and be it also criticism and attitude that we have to stand for, that we really come to something that drives the vision of the future, and then coming also to the name of the show, to be really shaping a mobility for a future.
Yeah, so, yes, absolutely. So what I gather from your answer also is that talking to each other is very important in that shift and communicating between the different types of mobility. Your bikes are quite expensive. They are premium bikes. Are there visionary concepts? Do you have ways to get your bikes in front of more people to sort of give more access to sustainable transportation to more people?
If you look at the bike, it's not an expensive transportation mode. If you look at Muller, yes, we are in the premium segment. Yesterday I was asked, would you rather say it's the Mercedes of the bikes or the BMW of the bikes? I don't know. You can name the Porsche.
Yeah, my brother said, when I said Dr. Wolf is on the panel, he said, oh, the Mercedes of
exactly,
e-bikes. So we have it's true apparently.
What does it mean? I mean, it means that, yes, it's a brand. It also means that we have a premium components. It's our mission to really build safe products which cost something. The technology in bikes are same like in cars. We have the same demands if you ride a lot. And yes, it costs money. We are not a luxury brand. Everything we do is very functional, and this is like component-wise also something that costs in the end and the engineering. But if you look at other new ideas and concepts, yes, of course, we have to make it more democratic. We have to make it accessible to all. And yes, we have leasing, we have sharing, and we have subscription, which makes it quite easy and quite not so cost-intensive to ride, also a premium bike, which, by the way, a lot of people do. And if you look at leasing, that was one of the main boosters of our growth also, because all of a sudden, and same in the car industry, almost everybody was able to ride or to drive a high-quality German brand.
Yeah, so you're lowering the barrier for entry for those e-bikes. And do you see a change in who buys bicycles today? More families, more young people? What's the trend?
Yeah, younger and younger. I mean, you have this typical target group that would say, oh, an e-bike, nothing for me, because I can ride myself. But I think there's a huge shift. So if you look at families, you just see it's not possible if you have 2 kids, a dog, and whatever, to go from the supermarket home with all your stuff. So you need an e-bike if you want to change to cycling. So for me, this would not be possible to take everything with me without an e-bike. So yes, we are attracted to younger people, even short kilometers, 2 kilometers we are now talking about. E-bike is attractive because it's an attractive product. Families, but also in the business-to-business sector, we are growing a lot because companies see that on the last mile it's good to have an e-bike. So accessibility for everybody and free choice, what we also heard here.
Great, yeah. Going back to Deutsche Bahn, demand for train travel is booming, it's high. The run on the famous Deutschland ticket shows that. How do you see the roadmap for the future for Deutsche Bahn? It has lacked in punctuality and customer satisfaction in recent years. What's your vision for a turnaround for that, and what do you need?
Yeah, I think everyone who has basically been on the train the last couple of months and years sees that the whole infrastructure is completely overloaded. I mean, the infrastructure is pretty much too old, it's prone to disruption, and it's just too full. And this is basically due to the fact that over the last couple of decades, we have invested too little into this infrastructure. And that also goes back to the competitive discussion that we just had. Because infrastructure and transportation is one of the key facilitation for economic growth of a country. And I think here we are now, and basically you might have read the article also on the ill man of Europe again, Germany, where also the example of the German and Deutsche Bahn infrastructure has been taken to illustrate how far Germany has come and deteriorated in infrastructure over the last couple of years. And from that perspective, we are very, very happy that the current government has taken the decision to invest 45 billion euros on top to the investments that were already granted until 2027 in order to overhaul the infrastructure. Because that, I think, is absolutely necessary that we build the infrastructure that can handle the growing demand of traffic. And if you look at the sustainability discussion, I think this is also very, very necessary. And to illustrate that with 2 examples, if you want to have a shift from freight from the road back to the rail, I think you have a tremendous impact and contribution to the environmental friendly traffic, because one freight train replaces 52 trucks on the road. One ICE4 replaces 350 cars on the road. And I mean, we have discussed that it's not about replacing everything. I think it's about the mode of transportation and to complement so that everyone finds the mode of transportation for the situation that it's currently in need and in demand. But this is something that we are currently working on. And together with the German government, we have put together a plan in order to meet the sustainability targets and the transportation targets in Germany. And that means that we overhaul the infrastructure, we digitize the infrastructure, and we also electrify the infrastructure where it's necessary. And we start with the main corridors, and that's also a completely new approach that we take in order to overhaul the infrastructure. We look at the busiest corridors in Germany, and we take the first one between Frankfurt and Mannheim next year. It's a 75 kilometers corridor. We close it down for about 5 months, and we completely rebuild it. Completely new tracks, new technology, and renovating the stations. So after the 5 months, you have a completely new piece of infrastructure, and that will have a tremendous positive impact on the whole network. And then year by year, we do that for 1 to 2 corridors, and by the end of the decade, we will have an infrastructure that is in a much, much better position, in a much, much better place. And in the 30s, we'll continue to build, expand the infrastructure, because we are building on a German railroad system that basically provides the German society the Deutsche Bahn that it deserves and that people rightly so expect.
So it's going to get better. You heard it here first. To maybe cap off, because obviously the public is going to get to IAA today. It's the first day for the public. Ms. Muller, can you talk a bit about what the public can see and experience here, also with connected mobility in mind? What are some of the highlights? Walk us through it.
Yeah, I think for the wider public, here is a B2B place. Here we want to discuss with experts about the future of all the things I mentioned before, from digitization to the question of the new mobility. And the open spaces are open for the public. You don't have to pay anything to enter. And we hope that we can convince the people that there are different opportunities. You can see a lot of electric cars, of developments. You can see how powerful our suppliers are. And they have a lot of test drives. We have also the test drive in the Englischen Garten with the bikes. You can do test drives with autonomous driving. So you see the future, and you can see there also the future of the connected mobility, and that was so important. As Dr. Wolf mentioned, we have to connect these in the best way that is possible, and then we will have the best opportunities. So we have to discuss it with city planners and so on to find a future there. And so there's also a citizen lab. We are discussing these questions also in the open space.
Great, yeah. So you've heard it. You can go out into the city, drive bikes, you can test drive cars, you can really experience what connected mobility is all about. And I think we've made a good start here by putting all of you together on the podium and discussing the future of mobility. So thank you very much for that wonderful discussion. And I think they deserve a big round of applause for this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much to our amazing panelists. Carsten Spohr, Sandra Wolf, Hildegard Muller, and our moderator, Stefan Nicola. What a riveting discussion. I will certainly be checking out that test drive in the English Gardens. If you haven't been, it is one of the best things that Munich has to offer.